I've had a few questions on section 1.4, and so instead of doing several different problems, I decided to go ahead and give a mini lecture over 1.4 as well. And I'm going to divide this into two parts. This is radical equations and equations in quadratic form. I'm going to do part one with solving radical equations. So just like I did in class, I gave you these little steps here to how to actually solve it. And I know most people don't actually write notes in class, so I'll write it down here again. But number one, isolate a radical. Number two is take the power of both sides equal to the root and then simplify. So if it's a square root, you would square both sides. If it's a cube root, you would cube both sides. And then after that, you repeat steps 1 and 2 if a radical persists. And so in other words, step 3, you're only going to do that when there's 2 or 3 radicals being added, usually just 2 at the most. We're not going to have very many of those. If it happens, you'll do it, but if you don't, then we're good. 4, at that point, you're going to solve it as usual. So when you simplify step 3, and when it's all said and done, then the equation that results is either going to be linear or quadratic. Now later on it might be something else, but for 1.4, they're linear or quadratic. And then lastly, you check your answer to make sure your answer is going to work out for you. And if it doesn't, you have to discard it. So it's like it's always been. So these are the 5 steps, and I decided to do a couple of examples. One reason I want to do an example like this one is because you have a square root and multiple terms associated with that. And so people will jump right in and just try to do the step number 2 without doing step number 1. What I mean by that is they'll start squaring everything. It does get rid of the radical, which is what people want to do, but then you square this and square this and square this, you get 9x squared is 16. And that's not what you want to do, because you can't just square the pieces. You got to square the sides. So before you do anything, you have to isolate a radical. So we'll isolate this one. So we're going to move this 3 over here, and we have the square root of 2x squared plus 6. I think actually it's 2x plus 6. And then that equals x minus 1, because negative 4 plus 3 is a minus 1. So we got square root of 2x plus 6 equals x minus 1. So the square root is now isolated, and so I can jump down to step 2 now. So we will square both sides. And that gets rid of the radical. So that'd be 2x plus 6 because the radicand is what's left. And then when you square the right side, it's not just x squared plus 1. A lot of people just slap a square, slap a square, slap a square, and get x squared plus 1 on the right-hand side. You square the sides, like I said a while ago, not the parts of the side. So you've got to get the x minus 1. Instead of having x squared plus 1, you're going to have x squared minus 2x plus 1. In other words, you FOIL it out. So this becomes x squared minus 2x plus 1. So now we have 2x plus 6 equals x squared minus 2x plus 1. So what we need to do now is move the terms to the right-hand side. So subtract 2x, subtract 2x. So this becomes x squared minus 4x, and then subtract 6, and then 1 minus 6 is negative 5, and that equals 0. So now we're on step 4, and it says solve as usual. And if it was linear, we would isolate the x, but this one's not linear. It's the second one down. It's quadratic, so we'll factor it and use the quadratic formula. And I believe this actually factors, and most of them will. If they don't factor quickly, you think, I don't know if this is right or wrong. So what you need to do is, if it doesn't factor, go back and just do a quick run through, see if your numbers, maybe you put a 4 when it needs to be a 3, and so it didn't factor because of that. If you're pretty sure that's works, then yeah, and it still doesn't factor, then you go ahead and use the formula. But I wouldn't just jump right into the formula, because usually if you're pretty good at factoring and something doesn't factor and you know it doesn't factor, and jump into quadratic formula, it might be because you made a number of mistakes somewhere above it. So anyway, we have this, and we have x minus 5 times x plus 1. And so x